Welcome to the Hope After Child Loss podcast, where we endeavor to offer stories of hope to grieving parents and siblings so that they might rediscover life filled with meaning, purpose, and hope. We invite you to come and join us. Welcome. I'm your host, Greg Buffkin, and we're so glad you could join us. Guys, my guests today are Tobe and Amy Witmer. Tobe and Amy, I am so glad that you could be our guest today and come and share your story. But before we jump into it, I would love for you guys just to take a minute or two and bring us up to speed on where you are today and a little bit about anything about your family that you would like to share. And whichever one of you would like to go first may do that.
Tobe, you want to go first?
Sure. We're Tobe, and Amy will introduce herself. But we're very happy to be here with you in the way of the kind of happiness that would love for the Lord to use our story to encourage someone else, to strengthen, to comfort, and to educate. And so we are a family of 5 and have lost our oldest daughter, Abigail, to suicide. It was 9 months just a couple days ago. We are right at the beginning, I guess, of healing. And I was a pastor for 31 years and have resigned after Abigail's death to start a new ministry.
And as I didn't mean to interrupt, but just a point of reference, you just resigned a couple of months ago, right?
January 6th was the public. Is that right, Amy? January 6th was the public.
Yes, the beginning of January, yes.
Right.
Amy, how about you?
Just, what Tobe said, we, family of 5, wonderful children. I'm a part-time teacher, teach art and health in a middle and high school in a Christian school. I also give piano lessons before and after school and in our home, kind of going along with this the new ministry that we are in to help those touched by suicide. And
you guys are in a brand new season of life and in a lot of different ways. And you've been teaching for how long, Amy?
This is my 11th year in the current school, and then I was 7 years in a previous school, and then I was about 2.5 years in a child care center before that. So whatever that adds up to.
So most of your life.
Yes. And teaching piano for about 32 years.
Yeah, 32 years.
Yeah, that is a very significant part of your life. So that makes you about 40 years old, right?
Exactly.
She's a very young whatever she is.
Right. Yes, I'm very observant.
People used to say to us, "Oh, I can't believe that you're the age you are. You look so young." But I noticed that people haven't said that much in the last year.
I'm not very often accused of that either. So, well, guys, thank you for sharing that. And so what I'd like for us to do now is, Tobe mentioned that, and you both mentioned that just in the last 3 months or so, you've started a ministry, and that ministry is called Self-Help's Group.
So it's Safe Help Group. Yes.
Yes. Thank you for correcting me on that.
Yeah. Safe is a word that connects a lot in the situation with people who have suicidal ideations and also people who are crushed by being survivors. So very early on, I realized, I've been the pastor of our church, Lighthouse, for 21 years and the lead pastor in a first generation church. A lot of work, a lot of seeing the Lord's hand of grace over the years and blessing that. But it was very clear, after June 28th that I just could not do that, or we could not do that any longer. And there was some foreshadowing of that, right, Amy? I mean, we kind of, we had been talking about a little bit, but that was kind of like the straw, that, okay, we're not going to be able to get back to the lead pastoring is extremely stressful and a lot of inner and outer struggles, inner as much as outer. and it just wasn't going to happen. So as we were laying there in the first couple of months, literally and figuratively, it just another idea go in our minds, and that is, we could we help in some way to save other people who are in jeopardy, to help give them tools and God's truth, especially a lot of very specific truth from Scripture, promises, and against the lies of suicide ideation. And that's a broad subject, because that's only one piece of the pie of why, as you know, of why people take their lives. Some of it is very organic and biologic, explanations, but the thinking portion, could we help? And then also, I would do almost anything to help other families not to feel the pain of losing someone to suicide. And so this idea began to come up out of the ashes of, maybe we could have a ministry that would, and we've been in ministry all of our marriage, 31 years. And so maybe we could have a ministry that would help prevent suicide, that would educate, the greater community and the greater church really about the road that leads to suicide, what's going on. And we had such a wealth of information left to us by our daughter, Abigail, in journals and video and audio clips. And she was extremely open to us about everything. So this was it was a shock, but not a surprise. And so maybe we could help people like that. And so suicide prevention, and then education to the greater community about the road that leads to suicide, and then comfort suicide survivors, those left behind.
Yeah, that is such important work. I have had other guests previously that have dealt with suicide as well. And of course, you guys know that we lost our son Ryan to suicide. So it's a subject in this country, and it comes out of an epidemic. I mean, the suicide rates in young people account for the majority of deaths. And that number just unfortunately seems to continue to grow. So let's take a step back, y'all. You've mentioned several times in your conversation, Toby, that this all came about from the loss of your daughter, Abbie. Amy, why don't you take a couple of minutes, or however long you would like to, because you're Abbie's mom, and just tell us a little about Abbie and what led to what you think were some of these struggles.
Right. Abbie was, of course, our first child. Very, very interesting from the very beginning. Very demanding baby from the very beginning, but just such a delight. Just when we had her, we were both just absolutely smitten with her, and she was just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful baby. And she as an adult, it was just fun and amazing to watch her grow up and become the woman she was. She was very creative. She was the type of person who walks into a room and just lights up the room. She made everybody happy who were around her. Anytime I was in her presence, I was just extremely happy. And she seemed to take away any sadness that was in me and other people.
That's a unique characteristic.
Yes, and she became my best friend.
That's what shocked many people, and they couldn't understand, because she was the one who they were leaning on a lot of times, and she was successful the opposite. Go ahead, Amy, I'm sorry.
That's very true. I think a lot of people just really did lean on her and just kind of depended on her to, in their hurt, and went to her in their hurt, and she helped so many people. She had a lot of very close friends, a lot of people she helped through college, after college, and like I was starting to say, she was my best friend. We texted all the time. We shared things all the time with each other. Yeah, she was just a wonderful person. Was very successful in her work, had a beautiful home, awesome husband and marriage and cat and a dog. and just,
Yeah.
she had a good life.
Yeah, and she was very young. I think you guys told me earlier she was 28 years
28.
old. Yeah. So, guys, along the way, as she was going through her teen years and into adulthood, did you guys become aware at any point that maybe she struggled with either anxiety disorder or clinical depression or both?
Yes.
Yes.
And actually, her junior year in high school, she shared with us that she had planned on taking her life and could not go through with it. She shared that with me one day after school, and it just kind of stopped everything. It's like, what?
Yeah.
We had no idea. And
So
then,
you guys had not noticed any depression symptoms
Well,
at that point?
she was very okay.
Or
So
that were overt anyway.
Yeah, she's a very outgoing person, and
Yes.
she felt and expressed extremely high highs and low lows.
yes,
And
yeah.
and I don't want to say theatrical in order to cause any kind of thought as this that her life wasn't real, but she was very passionate. So we saw, and she was very open with us. So we saw and we talked about and we cried with her, and we, there were, indications that there was anxiety and not indications, there was anxiety and depression, and she struggled. I mean, when things, if regular people would feel things, 25, she would feel them 75, and lots of tears and lots of talk and a lot. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and that is good. She shared a lot with us through high school. After she got, she finished college, came back, and she lived with us for a couple of years before she got married. So she did share a lot of that with us, and she was, she was in some counseling and working with a doctor, and with depression and anxiety issues. Yes.
Yeah, and that is more common than not when suicide is involved. I can't imagine hearing a story where, even if it was after the fact, discovering that individual struggled with anxiety and or depression. And it's such an epidemic in our country, and we don't have the kind of healthcare facilities and options, treatments available like we should. We've done a really good job with a lot of diseases. We've come a long way with treating cancer, and we're even making strides with Alzheimer's and things like that. But we've got such a long way to go in the mental health field.
Yeah, Greg, I think that part of that too is the complicated nature of suicide and suicide ideation, because it is not just a one factor kind of a disease or epidemic. There's so many different elements of it, and the elements being, everything from your background. If you have suicide in your background, you're higher statistically to have those considerations. To your environment. I mean, did you have something happen as a child? Were you abused as a child, neglected?
Right.
To biologic factors. I'm sure we'll talk about this, but Abbie, she had physical ailment. I mean, she had PCOS, which affected, diabetic, it's not the right word, but, all kinds of things like that too. She was also raped at 17 years old. And so all of, I think that what is hard is that some of these, like some specific cancer, you can, throw all the research into one element, one factor to try to deal with it. But it is so complicated that so many slices of the pie, that it's just hard to deal with all these factors and different factors in people.
Yeah, that is so true. And that is what complicates getting the proper treatment and knowing how to walk down that path with somebody that is experiencing those kinds of mental health challenges. And I think another thing that adds to it is just that, unfortunately, the false connotations on mental health. We don't look at it the same way as treating liver disease or treating a cancer or treating
Right.
You name the physical disorder. There's never any kind of negative connotations attached to that. But once you say mental health, it's shameful, really.
Stigma. It's a stigma.
Yeah, even within the Christian community.
Oh, especially in the Christian community, because the religious factor wants to turn everything into a spiritual matter, which, as committed believers, we understand that. But,
of course.
It's also the brain is the most complicated organ in your body. And to deny that there are physical, organic reasons why people have negative feelings and thoughts and these inclinations, it's kind of silly. It's like, putting leeches on people, George Washington's day. If your arm was broken, you would go to a doctor and get it fixed. But to think that everything can be fixed with a verse and a Christian song, and you must not have enough faith, it's really a bad thought process within the greater church that needs to be corrected and the stigma killed.
You're absolutely right. That narrative needs to be changed badly. And I'm glad that you made the reference to the brain being an organ, Toby, because it is. And unfortunately, any kind of disorder associated with that particular organ is looked at differently, because I think we think of those things as being more of just a battery of emotions, but they're not. They come out of very often chemical imbalances. Sometimes it's due to head injuries that someone could have had, and out of life experiences that create responses such as PTSD, things like that we just don't think of it in the same way that we do the physical disorders. And so I'm glad that that's something that you guys are addressing, because if you have a child who's battled that, then you understand it better than most.
It's a balance. Yeah. We do have to deal with the spiritual aspect. And yes, that's an element, that's a factor that we can deal with. And our ministry, as we travel to churches and schools, college, whatever, we deal mostly with that area. We strongly recommend doctors and skilled therapists that can deal with those sides of things. But, when you talk about denying the physical, there is hyper and hypothyroid issues.
Absolutely.
We just had a friend, and I say this as so much respect, but that she was struggling at the end of her life, a middle-aged older lady, with the way she was treating people. People noticed that her attitude, and just, thinking spiritually. Well, it came out that she had a lemon-sized tumor in her brain, and that was affecting, and it was, post, her passing, the doctors talked about this is what was going on, that was creating chemicals and creating whatever. And what was coming out of her in her daily life was a physical ailment that was coming out in a very relational way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's easy to judge when we don't know what's actually going on with somebody, and
to draw conclusions. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. And you can both answer this, or one of you can address it. But you guys have been in ministry for a long time, and I know that as a result of that, along the way, you have ministered to many other people with a wide variety of loss in their lives. So you guys are well acquainted with grief. You're well acquainted with seeing the impact that it has on people's lives. But on a personal level, until you lost Abbie, it had never really touched you at the level that it has now. What have you learned since you lost Abbie?
We have definitely learned a lot more, and we've actually, Toby and I have talked about this a little bit, that, yes, we have helped a lot of people who have lost loved ones, even children, but we had no idea
Yeah.
really the depth of the grief, of the hurt, the loss that they are going through, that they have been through, and how long that process is, and
The pain.
the pain, and just
Yeah.
that emptiness, that ache. We just had no idea. And honestly, I feel like there have been times that when I've seen people going through that, it scared me. I didn't
Yeah.
know what to do, what to say. I maybe avoided them, at the beginning, comforted them, but, said my platitudes. And then, I was afraid. I didn't know what to do. And we do see that with people, with us,
Right.
Amy said
but
this
now,
morning, we were talking about this very thing, and she said this morning, we were those people. The people who did not know how to react, or who said the wrong things, or who did not. I hate using the word avoid because that's so unkind, but it's true. I mean, when you are afraid of people that are in so much pain and are not reacting in any way that you understand, and are, I don't want to say toxic, but just extreme agony, you don't know what to do, so you don't do
yeah.
anything. You stay
One
away.
thing I did at the beginning of the school year, we had our teacher in service before our school year started. And this was, so Abbie passed in June, the end of June. And so this would have been the end of August. So about 2 months. Started back to school, and at our teacher in service, I knew how I would feel if one of my coworkers had lost a child, because we actually there was another lady in our school who lost her son in a motorcycle accident, and I just didn't know how to react. So now, being in that position, I asked my principal, I was like, can I please address our staff? She graciously allowed me, and I expressed, please don't be afraid of me. You'll see me crying probably. Please, I'm still the same person. I just, I'm grieving, but just please don't be afraid of me. You can talk to me. You can ask me anything. And I feel like that kind of broke that barrier a little bit.
Did you go back and talk, Amy, to that woman? Did you tell me that you did go
Not
back
yet,
and
not
and
yet.
talk?
I have
Talk
a
or was someone
coworker
else?
who lost her husband to suicide, 20 years ago. So yeah, we have yet to get together.
It'll happen. It'll happen. And Amy, I applaud you for doing that. 2 months after you lose Abbie, and you take the initiative to have that conversation with people that you knew were feeling awkward.
Yes.
And they were. I mean, we've
I know how I would have felt.
We've all been there. And like Toby said a few minutes ago, I was one of those people on the other side of losing Ryan. And sometimes you do feel like, when it happens to you, at least initially, because you're so overwhelmed with the shock and with the emotion of it all, even for weeks, sometimes you feel like, because people do kind of tiptoe around you, some don't tiptoe quite as softly, some just kind of run in the other direction, you feel contagious.
Yes.
And it's like Toby said, you guys both know, it's just people don't know what to do with it, and it's easier to avoid it. And I don't know about you guys, but we did struggle sometimes with feeling angry and resentful about that. But over time, the Lord showed us that we had been those people, and they react that way out of not understanding. It's out of, and I say this respectfully, it's out of ignorance of what you really are experiencing. So, we just have to learn to give grace.
That's been hard. You feel alone. And when you feel like those people who you used to be your close friends, some of them, and that they're avoiding, that they're not engaging. There was a couple that, I actually tried to reach out to or whatever, and it did not help. And that I had to deal with anger through some of that.
What would you guys say surprised you about this level of grief?
That's such a hard thing to answer because the pain, we're only 9 months in, and everything, every day, our comment is we have bad days and worse days, but that everything is, we feel it constantly. And it's a painful sorrow. There's this thing called broken heart syndrome, where the left side of your physical heart weakens in traumatic loss. And the stat is something like 4 to 6% of people with that actually die of broken heart syndrome. It affects your physical muscle. And Amy and I will talk about, we feel so heavy, and we feel, Amy just said the other day that, she hurt so much in her, her chest and her whatever. And it is rough. Our therapist, talks about the debilitating nature of complicated grief or of traumatic grief like this. I don't know. It's every day. And I think that's very hard for others because their lives moved on. At first there was a massive outpour and such a gracious, an amazing love and pouring out of sorrow and along with us. But then, as 2 months turns to 3 months and 3 to 4 and 3 to 6 months, their lives go on, and anything that they have experienced, the loss of whatever, your grandmother or a pet or whatever, after a couple of months, they normalize. Well, this is not something that you normalize quickly on the other side of at all. We're talking years and then never.
We both lost our fathers in the last couple of years, and it was hard for both of us to lose our dads. I cried every day for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and this is completely different.
Not even the same plane.
I was able to still work, through all that. I never missed a day. I worked, except for traveling for the funeral, and
our fathers were older. Our fathers were older.
It was expected.
That's supposed to happen.
Exactly.
This is completely different. And another thing, as far as the grief that we've noticed, is that we reach our capacity each day. And once we hit that, it's like then things may start setting us off, or deep diving into crying, or we're just mentally done, exhausted. And I feel like it's getting, I'm able to go a little bit more now than a couple months ago. I can see that for sure. But, once you get the, reach that capacity of what you can do that day, you're pretty much done.
Our therapist
That's very
was
true, Amy.
So kind in telling us that is normal. She told us that before we experienced it, when we were still in the first couple of weeks. But she said, just expect you're going to go to about 50% mental, physical for a while. And it's shocking that there's this point and you just fall off the edge. That's it. I can't, and it's less than what you once could do, but it's very hard to explain what the barrier is that you hit, the wall you hit. But you hit this wall and you got nothing left.
It's hard to explain, but when it happens, you experience the reality of it. It is very real.
Yeah.
I want to circle back to something you said a minute ago, Amy, when you said, as you were addressing the faculty a couple of months after you lost Abbie, and you said, I'm the same person. And yes, while that is true, haven't you guys also found that you are also different people than you were before? Talk about that a little bit as far as how you guys have experienced that.
Greg, could you tell us who we are? Because we don't know who we are. You're right. You're right. We are completely different people. But my point is that we are It's so fresh, even at 9 months. And we're waiting on the Lord to reform us. We don't know who we are. And that's part of the problem. Amy was able to stay in the same career and a lot of the same elements, but I wasn't. And we both, though, feel lost. Like, I don't know what Amy talks often about the future. What is post this? Is there a future? Is there a place where there's some kind of normalcy happens, or the new norm? But I feel just so disconnected from everything, from every aspect of who I used to be, and I don't know this new. We're trusting the Lord. We're walking each day, depending on Him, but I don't know where this is going.
And that's okay, because He does.
That's good.
And it's a day by day thing. And I think sometimes the mistake that we make is trying to bite off more than that one day that we're given, especially when, that's the way we're supposed to live anyway. Yeah. But when we are in something that is so deep and traumatic and painful, and there are a lot of other adjectives that we could add to that, and sometimes an hour at a time. And for people that are listening today that are in an even fresher season of grief than you guys are, we want them, I know that you guys do, to understand that, hey, if you get out of bed today and you go and you get a shower and get dressed, some days that's a huge win. And that's okay. If that's all you can do, please don't put more on yourself. Don't lay expectations on yourself that are so unrealistic. Sometimes other people do that, and sometimes we do it to ourselves. But there are no boxes that need to be checked, and you're not a project that needs to be fixed. It's just walking it out one day at a time. So we talked earlier about, you guys live in a relationship with Jesus, and you came into this in a relationship with Jesus. And I think I can speak for both of you in saying that's how you survived this, because I've heard too many other stories along the way where people have shared that as well. So I know that's true in your lives. But when you go through something that painful, something so traumatic in every aspect, what have you guys learned about God and your relationship with Him that even after 31 years of ministry, you didn't know before?
One thing that kind of struck us both, I think, in the first couple of weeks was that we still, I don't know the right way to say this, but we still had our faith. We still, we did not give up on God. And that in itself, I feel like was just a miracle, and was just a testament of our faith. And, that we didn't, yell at God. We weren't angry. We just, were just really depending on Him. And we both kind of visualized it the same, that we were just like broken, completely shattered, broken in God's hand. And He just was carrying us. Especially through those first few weeks, we just felt we couldn't do anything. There was just nothing.
Yeah.
And so we were just laying there in His hands, and He was just kind of bringing us through life.
Yeah, I think that I echo what Amy said. I feel a couple of things about that. I think that truth that we did not curse God and die, or whatever, like Job's wife, is testament that our faith is less from our side and more that it's a gift from God, and it's held by God. And so the other side is that I was very shocked that God seemed to be so silent for so long, but it really helped deep diving into the book of Job when I realized it was exactly the same for Job. And I have a theory about why. It's like there was nothing, like you were just in a void, and it is just dark, dark, dark. It's not negative. It's just nothing. And, people are writing these platitudes and cards and text messages that I'm praying that God is, you're feeling the arms, the hug of God. That's a real one. I'm like, dude, I'm not feeling nothing but darkness. I don't know what I mean, I don't want to be ugly, but people want the best. But, maybe this isn't the right time. But Greg, my theory is on that there's a time in grief to lament, to truly let it pour out. And it's very appropriate. We have a whole book of the Bible on it. We have half of the book of Psalms as well. That's Lamentations. And then, Jeremiah, who is just, even in the book written by his name and in Lamentations, is just pouring out, his heart to the Lord. And I likened it to when we found Abigail in the woods, and Amy, I tried to comfort Amy, and she just will not be comforted. It was not the time to comfort. It was a time to scream and yell and curse this broken world. And I think that there is a real element that when something like this happens, the most appropriate thing that can happen at first is for the anger and the brokenness and the sorrow to pour out, and for God to keep his distance for a while. And then, like the book of Job, then for him to come in a very strong way. And so that's how we feel. And there have been testaments to that as well. And the Lord has been so gracious.
Yeah. Well said. And maybe like you guys, the book of Job took on a whole new meaning after we lost Ryan.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing how accurate a portrayal that book is of someone who is going through what we've all experienced. And if you're listening today and it hasn't happened to you, but you have somebody in your life who is grieving the loss of a child and you don't know what to do or what to say, I think all three of us would tell you to do exactly what Job's friends did for the first 7 days that they came to visit him.
Yes.
They kept their mouths closed.
Yes.
And sat with him in silence.
Yes.
And that is sometimes, most often, I would say, in those early days, it's the very best thing that you can do for somebody that you really care about who's going through something so traumatic. Just offer the gift of your presence. And if words are necessary and they want to talk about it, let them bring it up.
Right.
But as Toby alluded to, please don't offer platitudes, spiritual Band-Aids that you're trying to apply to a gaping surgical wound. They're not helpful. There will be a time and a place where they might be helpful. But when those emotions are so raw and the pain is so deep, just offer yourself. It's that simple.
Right. And I think that looks like a text that just says, like, I'm so sorry, I'm here.
Yeah.
That's gold. The platitudes, the verses, the sending songs, as well-intentioned as people are, there is no way to process those. And they almost are like salt in the wound. This is not the time. I really believe that in the best intentions, they don't understand what's going on, and they don't understand the horror of it. So they try to throw every promise or whatever Band-Aid that they can, like trying to make it better. And here's the problem with that, Greg, is that they're connecting it with any sorrow they have known, or they're trying to empathize. Everyone is trying to empathize. And should I tell my
maybe something that happened, like when they lost their grandmother.
Yeah,
something that helped.
I've told you this before, but this is our premier example of our neighbor who caught us on a walk the first week, who she's crying. We don't know her extremely well, but she's crying, and she comes up to us and she says, I'm so sorry for what happened. I just heard. I know exactly what you're going through. I lost my boxer last week, and he was part of the family.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, she absolutely got it, didn't she?
Yeah. I mean, and I finally started telling, kind of told people that they don't need to empathize. There's no way to. You cannot get it.
probably one of the worst things that happened, besides the boxer thing maybe, was, and I know, and I don't mean to bash anybody or belittle, because I know everyone is just trying to do what they think is right. But we received in a card in the mail a little pamphlet, and it was seven or whatever, how many stages of grief. And it, you're just going through each of the stages, and I'm thinking, what? I'm living this right now. I don't need to know about this. Maybe, it's for other people to read, to understand what we are going through, and maybe to help us. But that's the very last thing I needed right after our daughter took her life. That's the last.
Well, yeah,
thing.
you were living it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we could write it. And that's hard. That is just so hard, because people, again, they mean very, very well, but there's kind of a disconnect there, because so we probably received 10 books on grief in the mail. Okay, so I've been a pastor for 31 years. I have 800 plus volumes in my library, 15 of which are on grief. Probably the same book. Okay, so there's some kind of disconnect there, but also I think people just are very well-meaning, and they want to do whatever they can do. And I'm thankful for them, and I love them. So, Greg, I shared that little thing with you that we're actually teaching now to help people minister to those in grief. You show up. So, you go to the funeral, you send them a card, you text them, you let them know that you're there. You show up, you don't say platitudes, you just say, I'm so sorry. And then you follow up. And that last step, people were great for the first month, but then their lives went on and ours didn't.
Yes. And I would add to that list of things that you want to avoid. Please don't say, if you call me.
Yeah.
Because you don't expect to get that phone call.
Yeah, nobody's going to call.
And you're not going to get a text. You're going to have to, as Toby said, you're going to have to follow up and take the initiative yourself. And you're right, Toby. People are good for the first few weeks, but after the funeral is over, everybody else goes back to their normal everyday life. And that's when the grief really sets in for those who have just lost someone.
Yes.
And that's when you realize how much your life has just been turned upside down, and there is no normal to go back to. If you're listening and it's not you, but you know someone, please be the one who chooses to go with them and ministers to them, even if it's just with your presence, for the long haul. It's not a one and done thing.
Yes.
It affects your life for the rest of your life. It doesn't mean that we can't do life again. It doesn't mean that we don't have joy again. It doesn't mean that we can't enjoy relationships again. That grief journey stays with us, but the grief journey can, in a relationship with the Lord, it can encompass and include hope and joy and meaning and purpose again.
Yes.
But it takes time. It takes time. So please be patient with those people in your life who are going through what Amy and Toby are going through. And guys, I want to thank you for being so gracious and for being so brave as to come and share your story in a very public way, much like you've done since you lost Abbie 9 months ago. Because in your roles as pastor and as a teacher, you guys have grieved in very public ways. And that adds a little bit of a layer of complication when you have to be on, as it were, all the time in front of other people. So thank you for that. And also thank you for what you're doing with the ministry that you've started to honor Abbie and to help other parents who are going through what you guys are experiencing. And again, the name of your ministry is Safe Helps. And if you're listening, I will include a link to that in Toby and Amy's episode and the summary. You can contact them through safehelps.com. And if you have any questions related to what they're doing, please get in touch with them. What's the email address that they can contact you guys with?
Yeah, so it's just my name and the website. So it's Tobe Witmer at safehelps.com. And like you had said, the website is, we have com or org, but our email address is TOBEWITMER at safehelps.
Very good. And again, I will include that in the episode summary. Guys, it's been such an honor to have both of you today. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I feel like
Greg.
there's so much that we could talk about, so much, and I do want to leave people with hope. And
yes,
there's in every side and dimension of this, the gospel of Jesus and the truths that come from that gospel are our hope, and are the hope of someone who's in jeopardy as well. Disease, biological side of it, but we can address the thinking side of it with the truths that are in Christ about our identity and about our significance and about his love for us, and that we are not alone. And on the other side, so many more there, but on the other side of the comfort that, we have great joy that we will see Abigail again.
yes,
in her death video, she confessed the gospel. And
what a comfort.
Oh, what a comfort. What a joy is that. And the Lord does care about us and has all of our tears in a bottle. And he knows Christ was the man of sorrows, acquainted with grief.
Absolutely. So he can empathize with ours. Thank you for sharing that, Tobe. Thank you both. I think you're very brave for what you're doing. And I think your ministry has the potential to help a lot of grieving parents and maybe help change this narrative that we talked about.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
If you find our podcast meaningful, we invite you to follow us so that you can automatically receive the latest episodes. Also, we'd like to invite you to contact us and talk with us about sharing your story on a future episode, because every story is important and matters to God. Please reach out via email at hope@emptychairendeavor.com. That's hope@emptychairendeavor.com. And as always, thank you so much for listening.